talk after lunch, right? You're reading Torah now.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Will you answer a question?
No.
After lunch, answer a few questions. I'll do whatever you want. Answer a few questions. I'll answer a few questions.
Do you want to turn the microphone back on then?
It's on, yeah.
You got to click the switch.
Okay, so I was just wondering if you could say something about the relationship of individual group in your fourth stage model. Because it seems like in the extremes, you either have an individual flitting and no place to flit to because everybody's an individual and there's no groups that have decided, or you have groups that have no new inputs and everything in between. But how do you
At the end, we will be a group in stage 4 when those of like-minded vision connect. In other words, when you don't start by being a group. The group is that which forms. It's like there becomes a people who knows God. So instead of saying there are Reformed Jews, there's conservative Jews, there becomes a people for whom this idea, this practice, this thing becomes something important to them. Ultimately, the collective of Jewish life are the collective of those people who feel that they want to answer that question. In other words, there could be 30 different answers to that question. And then there's a network of people who become a people by virtue of wanting to answer that question of to be Jewish means. But it's not a predefined community.
Well, no, I get that.
It just, the community gets formed afterwards. Maybe. Yes?
And how, what are the criteria that's what I'm looking for that will indicate that this is a uniquely Jewish kind of worldview? Like,
What are the criteria that will make it a uniquely Jewish worldview? None. There are no criteria, and as I actually mentioned, it doesn't even have to be uniquely Jewish.
because that's what I'm...
It doesn't. Maimonides had faith in one God, and it wasn't unique. Do you know? There is no category less important in fourth stage Judaism than the category of uniqueness. No category less important of unique.
Less important.
Less important. It just doesn't matter. People want something unique when your identity is already self-evident. You want to know your team. Now you're not choosing on the basis I want to be part of something unique. You want me to wake up in the morning and to say I'm Jewish. The first thing that I have to look for is something that's compelling. Whether it's unique or not is not important. And if it's compelling, and if it's prevalent, then they'll come. Now, it could very well be that that same person will find that same idea in another religion. It's very possible. And that's fine. Do any of us believe that Judaism is better than Christianity? Anybody here believe it? I don't believe it. Good for you. I don't. I definitely don't believe it. I don't believe it's better than Islam. I don't. Somebody who wants to live a meaningful spiritual life within Christianity or Islam or Buddhism, God bless you. I don't see any difference between me and you. I would like to compete for you. I would like you to see within Judaism, but I can't claim anything unique or anything superior about it. Just have a community which does something. Have a community or have an institution that stands for something, then people will come. And you have to work so much harder. It would be great if I could basically tell everybody, we're the only ones who are doing this. I'm sorry, I've talked about this for 20 years. I've yet to find any idea that we are the only ones who do it. Only one. The only way I can claim that Judaism is unique is to make sure that you don't know anything. If you don't know anything, you don't go anywhere, then I can claim that we're unique. But the minute you meet somebody else, oops, it's a great crisis of faith. Oh, you actually found somebody else who's moral. Oh my God. You found someone else who shares family values. Oops. Tolerance, faith in God, ethics. There's some other people out there. So it's not, it doesn't, but it's very, very precarious. Because there's nothing by definition that's forcing you that, like we own it. It's like, God loves us best. We're the only ones who got God's Torah. We're the one. All that stuff in fourth stage just doesn't work. Now, whether we're going to survive this fourth stage, nobody knows. But that's what we're in. And so we better make sure that our institutions are stronger and better. And know very well that my Christian and Muslim colleagues are asking the same questions. And they're going to try to make their institution better and better. And a Jewish family, and when a Jewish spouse marries a non-Jewish spouse, it's not going to be self-evident what's the best place to belong to. And if our institutions are great, they'll come. And if our institutions aren't great, they won't come. And count on the fact that somebody else's institutions are going to be great. So you better get busy.
I study the Torah when I go on Saturday morning, and we go from Genesis to the end and then back again. I've never held much faith in the Midrashes. You told us a little story today that was the first I'd ever heard of the beginnings of Abraham. It was a nice story. And I don't know whether or not I am getting the full essence of the Torah without the embellishments and the commentary of those people like my mom.
Yeah, I don't know what, there's two separate things. I don't know what study group you're in, but the separate question is, what's your soul? Now, your soul doesn't like Midrash. I don't know if that, or is it you're not just familiar with it?
Well, I didn't want anything psychological about this. I just wanted to discuss.
Because I don't know whether you're talking psychologically, descriptively, so what's the question?
I go to Minyan on Saturday morning.
And
what I'm asking you is, can I really understand the Torah without reading the Midrash?
could you understand Torah without reading Midrash? Yes. Could you understand Judaism without reading Midrash? No. Because Torah is a very, very small part of Judaism. You can understand Torah without Midrash. But the Jewish people have been talking with this book for over 2,000 years. Their conversation with this book has shaped who you are. And therefore, it's not about getting the Torah right. It's about being exposed to the breadth and width of Judaism. And you're talking psychologically, descriptively. So what's the question?
I go to Minyan on Saturday morning.
And
what I'm asking you is, can I really understand the Torah without reading the Midrash?
could you understand Torah without reading Midrash? Yes. Could you understand Judaism without reading Midrash? No. Because Torah is a very, very small part of Judaism. You can understand Torah without Midrash. But the Jewish people have been talking with this book for over 2,000 years. Their conversation with this book has shaped who you are. And therefore, it's not about getting the Torah right. It's about being exposed to the breadth and width of Judaism. And so there might be other things to look at. And I'm not quoting Maimonides because Maimonides is telling you what happened. Maimonides is giving an idea about what Judaism could be. And it's worthy of you if it interests you. There's a whole, we've developed, we've come a long way since the Bible. We've come a very long way. And that 2,000 years should be, I believe, part of every educational process that a Jew goes through. Judaism is better for that process. Those 2,000 years have added new dimensions to Judaism that you won't find in the Bible. But the Bible is an interesting book, some of the time. And some parts of it, as you know, if you've been doing it for years, there are certain parts that you wish weren't there. But it's that plus the other conversation. I think it's worthwhile to add to your learning experience. Yes.
So the question I have, you talk about a couple that has two different religions, and perhaps the non-Jew has decided they don't want to convert for whatever reason, maybe their own family makes it difficult, but they're married. And then you have children. And if to your
reality. Now, it's not me who say to you that you can argue superiority. If you're married to someone who grew up as a Christian, the mere fact that you are marrying them is your declaration of the depth and meaningfulness of Christianity. If you thought Christianity stunk, then what are you doing with his spouse? Come on. And their grandparents who are around the table. What do you say? Shh, you have two conversations? When they're in the room and when they're not in the room? That's not me. This is, maybe you don't want somebody saying it to you, or maybe the consequences might be difficult to deal with. But Christianity's produced some really pretty decent people. It has. And it's produced a bunch of people that Jews are married. And they love them. And they find a lot of things in common with them. A lot of things. And then, it depends. If you marry somebody who grew up as a Christian but doesn't see Christianity, or in particular Jesus, as an essential part of their life, you have one story which then unfolds. If you marry somebody for whom Christianity is an important part of their life, and Judaism was not an important part of the Jews' life, then another story evolves. If you have two spouses for whom each one of their religions are important, a third story evolves. And this has nothing to do with Donniel. I don't have to be here to tell you that. This is the story of American Jewish life. Which one of, here you have three couples. Right? You're like, what is going to happen with, her name is Chelsea?
Yes.
Like, who's Jew? What's going on there? What will be? He's an observant conservative Jew. Is he? Is he not? How committed she is to her Catholic tradition, Christian tradition, not Catholic, Protestant, Methodist. I don't know. We don't know. What are the kids going to do? This is not Donniel. This is America. Now, within that context, there's nothing that you could make happen. Wrong term. You can't make anything happen. You can maybe increase the odds. That's all you could do. You increase the odds. If you yourself care more, the odds are that your religious identity increases. If grandparents and family does more, but it's sometimes if they do too much, they become counterproductive. Because then they become the in-laws that nobody wants to go to because you're giving me a headache. It's like every time you look at me, it's like you have an agenda. Like, don't you see me? Like, leave me alone. It's like, I understand your agendas, but they're not my agenda. I'm like, and you should know, son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws read it all the time. So, how do you do it? You don't make anything. You live your life. You live a meaningful Jewish life. Your institutions are, maybe the light within it will say, oh, that's who I want to be. Maybe. And maybe not. But I'm not the prophet of doom. Jews have, I'm not a prophet of anything. This is it. You want more? Go back to 1872. You're in 214, you have nothing more. Nothing more. But what you have to do, and this is part of the life, is you could also become, on the one hand, overly depressed, or you could become overly optimistic. Overly depressed is to see that, oh my God, everything is nothing, it's being destroyed, there's no hope, the Jewish people are going to die, thank God there's ultra-Orthodox. You can get overly optimistic by every single kid, who invites 3 friends over for a drink of beer on Friday night and call it a Shabbos dinner. You could also oh my God, my child's wonderful to have some beer with friends on Friday night. Tradition is so important. And then when that happens, it becomes a stupid religion which nobody wants to join. And then the Jewish community is willing to pay for the beer. That's not a joke. The Jewish community is willing to pay for the beer. It's called birthright next. No, for serious. Birthright next. They'll pay for the beer. When you do that, I tell you, this is not my money. So you don't have to get overly depressed. You don't have to get overly excited by every little mishigas that somehow your kid is doing. But it's just another, Maimonides is setting a standard, which we don't want to hear sometimes because it really, really obligates us. It obligates us to get very, very serious. But the one thing is you can't make anybody do it. It just isn't. And if, anyway, you understand. Yes, ma'am.
I'll try to make this quick. If I understood you, you give equal respect to the Muslim religion and to Christianity. But the Muslims with their Sharia law and the Christians who still blame us for killing Christ, how can we have that good feeling, whatever you want to call it?
Homework for you. Okay? Read Deuteronomy 20. And you go tell me after you read Deuteronomy 20 that there's a fundamental difference between Jewish law and Sharia law. Okay? After you read Deuteronomy 20, I'll give you 30 other chapters if you want. The fundamental question is, again, when it comes to Judaism, you're willing to say that Deuteronomy 20 is not part of your Judaism.
It's not possible.
It is.
Many parts of the Bible.
Many parts of the Bible.
Right.
Now, the problem is not with Sharia. The problem is with which individuals within Islam are willing to say which parts of Islam are not part of Islam. So I have no fundamental problem with Islam as a religion. I do have fundamental problems with certain Muslims for whom their understanding of Sharia law is something that I don't respect. I do have fundamental problems with some Jews for whom certain parts of Judaism are not part of what I respect. And I have certain problems with Christians for whom certain parts of Christianity are not worthy of respect. I have that with all. So now, therefore, it's just all of them are out there. Now, is there more Muslims? Are there less Muslims in the world than there are Christians and Jews who are willing to do this interpretive move with Sharia? The answer is yes. There are, at present, less Muslims who do so. I think that's an objective fact. But there is nothing inherently flawed within Islam that doesn't enable it to do the same interpretive moves that we Jews and Christians are doing. In fact, it would actually be easier. Last question, comment?
Well,
Yeah,
I think you answered it, but I guess my question was really, why is this happening now? What are the conditions that are making this the conversation that is important, that we're all having?
It's
In other
why?
words, and it has happened in the past, in other
Right,
in other points in time, but it reverts for whatever reason. So in other words,
There's
this
the
may not
most-
be a standing conversation.
There's
I know
there's
that-
multiple fact features that make this the perfect story. Multiple features that made it a perfect story. The most significant of which is the loving embracing of Judaism by the larger Christian American society. That's the most significant change. That embrace has removed ethnic Judaism. That embrace has removed the quantitative, or rather the qualitative distinctions between Christianity and Judaism. That's one feature. The second feature is the fact that for over 200 years now, Judaism divides us and doesn't unite us. There's 4 or 5 different stories that make this perfect storm called 2014. There's multiple fact features that make this the perfect story. Multiple features that made it a perfect story. The most significant of which is the loving embracing of Judaism by the larger Christian American society. That's the most significant change. That embrace has removed ethnic Judaism. That embrace has removed the quantitative, or rather the qualitative distinctions between Christianity and Judaism. That's one feature. The second feature is the fact that for over 200 years now, Judaism divides us and doesn't unite us. There's 4 or 5 different stories that made this perfect storm called 2014. And all together, it just, for some of you, it's been around for 30 years. It's just getting stronger and stronger and stronger, more predominant. Another feature that's impacting it is the fact that people relate to community very, very differently. The place of community is fundamentally changing. The place of boundaries is fundamentally changing. Another feature is the fact that the Jewish community's been coasting for probably much of the last century. We've been coasting. We haven't been producing institutions and ideas of excellence at the same level that we were doing in the past. We're coasting. We were sort of in survival mode.
Well, we're contributing to the larger society as opposed to the
But even right, but it's like we're sort of like we're in survival mode. I do believe the Holocaust, one of the greatest, not only did it destroy 1/3 of the Jewish people and 1/3 of our talent, it also dominated Jewish consciousness for so much time. And as a result, to be a Jew was to say never again. To be a Jew was not to say, who do I want to be? Every one of you were raised in a Jewish world where Elie Wiesel was right, that to be Jew, the 614th commandment is not to give Hitler a posthumous victory. Not to give Hitler to have Jewish children because we're alive. So that's okay. But that's not enough. But for the last 50 years, we haven't been talking. Seriously. We haven't been talking about what is it that we want. And I think the Holocaust has created a mediocrity in Jewish life that we still haven't gotten out of. It's mediocritized Jewish life in such a way, it killed talent, huge, I'm sure. 1/3 of our greatest ideas and creators and talent were wiped out. But both the building of Israel and the Holocaust have put Jews into survival mode instead of ideas and values mode. And so when you add that together with a loving environment, you have a reality in which our identity is not self-evident. And we have to get back to some of these old classical ways. Not exactly. We're not going to go back to second stage Judaism. But we're faced with a different reality. And you want to keep on, if you're just going to keep on doing, and you can't be tired. Inertia, this is what we've done. Like this institution, Aitz Hayim, look, I come here, are you who you want to be? If the answer is yes, then I find you boring. Are you who you want to be? You can't be who you want to be. Because there's something wrong with what you're thinking about who you want to be. You have to be uncomfortable. I know it's terribly difficult. You have to be uncomfortable. So you don't have to be like, I haven't slept in 15 years. Little. I haven't had a sleepless night in, not sleepless, the opposite. I haven't had a full night.
A good night's sleep.
I haven't had a good night's sleep in 15 years. The only time I have a good night's sleep is when I travel and I take sleeping pills. That's the only time I have a sleepful night. But you should be sleepless. You got to be sleepless, and you have to be sleepless about your institution. You got to, and you have to push because we've allowed these other things to sort of just take over, and Maimonides is turning to a fourth stage Jew and saying, let me put up a principle. Let me put something before you, which is worthy of you to think about, to struggle with, and not to sleep over. Shabbat Shalom.
So we're going to have a fourth stage Torah reading, which means we'll have 2 aliyot. The first one is for everybody to participate in Torah and realize with a radical minority, they'll come up and participate in saying our Torah is ours to look at. And then the second aliyah will be for birthdays, because this is the first Shabbat of the month, and we have a new custom of making all birthdays on the first Shabbat of the month. So everybody who wants to come up for an aliyah, anybody who's never had an aliyah at Aitz Hayim, everybody who's had an aliyah at least every Shabbat in the last year at Aitz Hayim, come on up for this aliyah.
Anybody who wants, yeah.